Good evening. Everything is working. That's good. So in my talk tonight, I'm planning to introduce you to some of the people, places, and events comprising Dvořák's New York, actually from his arrival in September 1892 through May 1893, which includes the months leading into his composing of the New World Symphony. I will be examining the reception of Dvořák in America, as well as his response to the sights and sounds of New York City, resulting in his masterwork, the Ninth Symphony, from the New World. Antonín Dvořák came to America as a world-renowned composer, in fact, a celebrity, and in New York received him as a celebrity. He was catapulted to fame by his Slavonic dances in the 1880s, championed by Brahms, his music frequently performed in European capitals, and lauded in England, where he traveled 9 times to present his large-scale choral works. While in America, he was the center of publicity. Literally hundreds of articles were published about him and his work in newspapers and periodicals. I show you here an engraving of Dvořák and an article published in Century magazine just prior to his arrival in September 1892. The Dean of American Music Critics, Henry Krabel, wrote with optimism of Dvořák's task to contribute to the development of a national music expression in America. He wrote, "The coming of Antonín Dvořák to be director of the National Conservatory of Music is an episode in the history of musical culture in America which has unusual elements of interest. In the story of his life, there is a tinge of romance which makes its perusal peculiarly delightful in this age of high average talent and prosaic plodding. It is a story of manifest destiny, of signal triumph over obstacle and discouraging environment. To rehearse it stimulates hope, reanimates ambition, and helps to keep alive popular belief in the reality that that precious attribute, the name of which seems almost to have dropped out of current musical vocabulary. Never in the history of art did the critic of contemporary music have so little use for the word genius as he has had since the death of Chopin." In praising Dvořák's genius, Krabel makes reference to the popular rags to riches story surrounding the rise of Dvořák, born the son of a butcher in dire poverty and rising to fame by dint of talent and hard work. This was just the kind of story that resonated with American Victorian audiences and assured a hearty welcome for Dvořák. Let me introduce you to Jeanette Thurber, Dvořák's American patroness. Jeanette Myers Thurber enticed Dvořák to New York with a salary of $15,000 per year, a fortune at that time and equivalent to more than $300,000 a year today. Tchaikovsky had recently conducted at the opening of Carnegie Hall in May 1891, reportedly for an ample salary, and that event may have encouraged Thurber to think big. Just 1 month later, on June 6, 1891, she telegrammed Dvořák with her 20-word offer. And here you see the telegram. "Would you accept position, Director, National Conservatory of Music, New York, October 1892. Also lead 6 concerts of your works." It took more than 7 months to convince the reluctant Dvořák to accept, but her powers of persuasion and publicity tactics won him over. The visionary wife of an elite food merchant, Thurber created the National Conservatory of Music of America in 1885 and staked her personal fortune on the project. Her ideas were progressive and egalitarian and appealed to Dvořák. She accepted students of talent regardless of income, gender, race, or physical disability for little or no tuition, and her experiment was to have wide ramifications on the future of American music. Thurber was the daughter of a Danish immigrant violinist, raised in upstate New York, and studied at the Paris Conservatory, which was the source of some of her ideas. Before establishing her own conservatory, she underwrote children's music concerts and the city's first Wagner Festival. Her school was initially geared to opera training, and she founded an opera company dedicated to the idea of performing opera in English rather than the predominant German. When the venture failed after 3 hectic seasons, she broadened her mission of the conservatory to include instruction of all types of music and composition, recruiting an excellent faculty, and kept the institution alive for close to 30 years, though it's generally acknowledged that the high point was reached under Dvořák's residency from 1892 to 1895. Her board members included Andrew Carnegie, William K. Vanderbilt, August Belmont, Henry Marquand, Joseph Drexel, and Judge William Choate, people drawn from the major industrial and social elite of New York. The school obtained federal recognition but never received federal funding, which is why it struggled with financing throughout its existence. In selecting Dvořák to be the director of the conservatory and lead the search for an American style of music composition, she made a bold move. Dvořák, a nationalist who embraced folk music as a source for his classical works, grew to believe that the melodies of the African Americans and Native Americans could provide the foundation for an American school of composition, giving inspiration to his students and grand students, as we heard yesterday, among them Reuben Goldmark, who taught Aaron Copland and George Gershwin, and Will Marion Cook, who mentored Duke Ellington. These ideas placed Dvořák at the center of controversy, as the merits of his statements were argued in a transatlantic debate about the meaning of his new work, and I refer here specifically to the New World Symphony, which put those beliefs in action. The debate continues in many ways to this day. Let us now look at New York City in 1892, the year Dvořák arrived. Shown here in images from King's Handbook of New York City, published in the same year as Dvořák's arrival. These panoramic views were taken from the dome of the recently completed World Newspaper Building in Lower Manhattan. You see clearly the Empire City spread out in all its glory with a population of 1.8 million. As King's Manual stated, today the city of New York is not only the metropolis in the United States, but in population, in wealth, in influence, in enterprise, in all that best distinguishes modern civilization, it is the rival of the great capitals of the old world. Here are a few more views. East, west, north, south. Dvořák and part of his family arrived in late September 1892, in time for the celebration of the 400th anniversary of Columbus's landing in America, which Dvořák viewed from the window of his hotel, the Clarendon on 4th Avenue and 18th Street overlooking Union Square. He wrote a friend back home, "Just imagine row after row of marchers, an incredible procession of people working both in the fields of industry and the crafts, and huge numbers of gymnasts, among them members of the Czech Sokol, and crowds of people from the arts and also many nationalities and colors." And all of this went on uninterruptedly from dawn until 2 in the morning. Thousands upon thousands of people and an ever-changing sight, exclamation mark. And you should hear all the kinds of music, exclamation mark. Well, America seems to have demonstrated all it is and all it is capable of, exclamation mark. I haven't got enough words to describe it. In his first public appearance, on October 21st, 1892, Dvořák conducted the world premiere of his Colombian Te Deum, composed especially for the Colombian Quadricentennial. The performance took place at Carnegie Hall with the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra and a chorus of 300. And here we see the newly opened Carnegie Hall. New York was a world music capital, and Dvořák thus landed in its midst with fanfare. Music was central to the city's culture. There was a large concert-going and opera-going audience eager to embrace Dvořák and his music, though he himself did not seek the publicity and was essentially a reticent family man. Colonel Thomas Wentworth Higginson, a Unitarian minister, Civil War veteran, and abolitionist, spoke at that event at Carnegie Hall for 20 minutes. The lecture title was, and I quote, "Two New Worlds, the world of Columbus and the new world of music." which many believe may have inspired the title of Dvořák's Ninth Symphony at a later date. Dvořák soon moved to an apartment that was more commodious than his hotel and economical, located at 327 East 17th Street. The house was built in 1852 in the Italianate style, just off Stuyvesant Square. It was a typical, modest New York row house that had been converted into 2 flats by the owner, a widow. Dvořák's family occupied the parlor and the basement floors. We have very little physical evidence of how it looked, since it was sadly demolished in 1991 after a long battle to preserve it. On the left is the exterior as it looked around 1921, the memorial plaque already installed. On the right, we have a few precious photos taken by conductor Maurice Perez, author of the book Dvořák to Duke Ellington, as demolition work was in progress. The mantel is seen in the process of being salvaged by Czech-American preservation architect Jan Pokorny and is currently the centerpiece of the Dvořák room in the Bohemian National Hall, which hopefully you will come up and see later this evening. Here we have the Dvořák family and friends in the rear courtyard of the townhouse. Wife Anna and son Antonín on the left. Let's see if we can get this going. This is Anna, Antonín. Daughter Otilia, Dvořák, of course. This is Josef Kovařík, Dvořák's personal secretary. And we can see, by the way he's looking at Otilia, that he's already got his eye on her. And these are friends of the family. Josef Kovařík was a student at the Prague Conservatory when Dvořák met him, lived with them as a member of the family, playing a vital role in Dvořák's affairs, and persuading him to visit Kovařík's Czech-American hometown, Spillville, Iowa, in the summer of 1893. Dvořák had this to say about his American home in correspondence of November 27, 1892. We live in 17th Street East, 327, only 4 minutes from the school, and are very satisfied with the flat. Mr. Steinway sent me a piano immediately, a lovely one, and of course free of charge, so that we have one nice piece of furniture in our sitting room. Besides this, we have 3 other rooms and a small furnished room and pay $80 a month. A lot for us, but the usual price here. We have breakfast and supper at home and go to a boarding house for dinner. Despite his high salary, Dvořák chose to live modestly, a life focused on work, family, and composing. In his apartment, Dvořák received many visitors, among them Harry Burleigh, on the left here, you see him, an African-American conservatory student who sang spirituals to Dvořák and remembered seeing uncaged birds, Dvořák's pet thrushes, flying around while the children rushed about in charming scenes of domestic disarray. This modest space, filled with people and activity, was where Dvořák created his Symphony No. 9 from the New World in the period from December 1892 to May 1893, and later the Sonatina for violin and piano, biblical songs, and cello concerto, among others. This map shows you the Stuyvesant Square neighborhood and the historic district as it stands today. Dvořák House was just outside the district, where you see Dvořák Place marked on East 17th Street. Stuyvesant Square, laid out in the 1840s, is bisected by 2nd Avenue, which Dvořák had to cross as he walked to school. King's Manual commented in 1892 that while the district was aristocratic, the park itself was frequented by nearby tenement dwellers. Dvořák often walked the few blocks to the conservatory at 126-128 East 17th Street with someone at his side, since he suffered from agoraphobia, a fear of open spaces. Oops. Here's one of the landmarks. This is Stuyvesant Square as it appears today. And here's one of the landmarks he would have passed on the way to the conservatory, the early Romanesque revival, St. George's Episcopal Church, dating from 1846 to 56, at Rutherford Place and 16th Street, facing Stuyvesant Square. This is where Harry Burleigh sang at Sunday service for close to 50 years, the first African American to do so, thanks to the intervention of church elder J.P. Morgan. And here we see the former location of the National Conservatory of Music of America, which occupied two adjoining townhouses identical to the one you see here in the center. The conservatory townhouses were demolished in 1911 to make way for Washington Irving High School. Dvořák's work week consisted of 3 hours, 6 days a week. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday were to be spent instructing composition and orchestration to only the most talented students at Dvořák's specific request. And Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday were to be spent in conducting the orchestra and choir, as well as holding office hours. There were more than 600 students enrolled at the conservatory, including well over 150 African Americans, among them Harry Burleigh, the voice student who was assigned to Dvořák by Mrs. Thurber to be his musical assistant. Burleigh served as the orchestra librarian and copyist and filled in on double bass and timpani. As mentioned, he also accompanied Dvořák home and was soon introducing him to plantation songs and African American spirituals. Union Square, here seen today, was the cultural center of New York in Dvořák's period, and many music vendors and music halls were located in the area. The Grand Steinway Hall showroom with a marble facade was located on East 14th Street at Union Square. Got ahead. Despite Dvořák's renowned reticence, he lived in New York very quietly and in general did not go out into society. He was to become an urban adventurer, fascinated by trains, but unable to penetrate the train sheds at Grand Central. He traveled uptown to see them emerge from the tunnels. According to his son Whitaker, he developed a new interest in steamships, tracking the arrivals and departures by going to various parts of the city. He's known to have followed steamships of the Red Star Line, carrying mail from New York to Europe. While some may see this behavior as quirky, it is in fact typical of the period interest in technology and transportation. The memoirs of Dvořák's secretary Josef Kováčik also record that Dvořák went to Central Park on Sundays for outings with his children. Kováčik remembered it thus: "What the master missed in America was his pigeons and locomotives. He felt the want of these two hobbies very much, but here too he at length found a modest substitute. One day we went with the master to Central Park, where there is a small zoological garden and buildings with different kinds of birds. And then we came to a huge aviary with about 200 pigeons. It was a real surprise for the master, and his pleasure in seeing the pigeons was great, and even though none of those pigeons could compare with his own pouters and fantails, we made the trip to Central Park at least once, and often twice a week." Here's Central Park and the various structures that could be visited in the period of the late 1890s. We see here a confident-looking Dvořák with a rather jaunty cravat in this image dating from 1893. Taken by the New York photographer William Spiess, it was circulated widely in carte de visite format and reproduced as an engraving for publications. The Dvořák American Heritage Association recently acquired an autographed imperial-sized version for the Dvořák room at the Bohemian National Hall, and we have souvenir postcards of this image that we are handing out today, so be sure to get one before you leave. Dvořák knew great things were expected of him. In a letter to his Czech patron, Josef Hlavka, he confided, "The Americans expect great things of me, and the main thing is, so they say, to show them to the promised land and kingdom of a new and independent art. In short, to create a new national music." If the small Czech nation can have such mission, they say, why could not they too, when their country and people are so immense? Forgive me for lacking a little in modesty, but I only tell you what the American newspapers are constantly writing. It is certainly both a great and splendid task for me, and I hope that with God's help, I shall accomplish it. There is more than enough material here and plenty of talent. I have pupils from as far away as San Francisco. They are mostly poor people, but at our institute, teaching is free of charge. Anybody who is really talented pays no fees. We have only 8 pupils. I have only 8 pupils, but some of them are very promising. In mid-December 1892, Dvořák began work on American themes, filling in 11 pages of his sketchbook. He then composed a continuous sketch and the full score of the New World Symphony from January to May 1893. On May 24, 1893, Dvořák carefully signed and dated the last page of the finished score of his symphony. Fine, praised be to God, at 9 in the morning. In an unusual gesture, he returned to the score later in the day to add a euphoric note, family arrives from Southampton, telegram 1:33, showing his delight about being reunited with the rest of his family, now on their way to New York. In the midst of this excitement, on May 21st, the articles about Dvořák's new symphony and his ideas about an American style of music started to appear in the New York Herald, beginning with an article titled "The Real Value of Negro Melodies," believed to have been written by the sensation-seeking reporter James Creelman, who you see up here on the left. The article that I introduced the lecture with was by Henry Crable. James Whitaker was on the faculty at the conservatory and basically a friend of Dvořák, but then kind of turned into a poison pen type because he was not happy that James Creelman got the scoop on this first interview with Dvořák. And then Henry Fink, another reporter, was also on the faculty of the conservatory. He wrote a book, My Adventures in the Golden Age of Music, and he was a true friend also of Dvořák in his reportage. The story included Dvořák's famous statement, "In the Negro melodies of America, I discover all that is needed for a great and noble school of music. They are pathetic, tender, passionate, melancholy, solemn, religious, bold, merry, gay, or what you will. It is music that suits itself to any mood or any purpose. There is nothing in the whole range of composition that cannot be supplied with themes from this source." The controversial theory set off a transatlantic debate via the Herald's newly laid transatlantic cable. You can imagine the heated debate, and you can appreciate how much of a pioneer Dvořák was in his thinking. The journalists, of course, played up the controversy to build their circulation in keeping with the tradition of yellow journalism that flourished in this period. Thurber herself may have encouraged some of the press by retaining journalists to bring attention to her projects. With the summer approaching, Dvořák was persuaded by his secretary Kovařík to spend his first vacation in Spillville, Iowa, with Kovařík's Czech-American family. The maestro looked forward to the respite, and with his entire family in tow, made the 1,320-mile train trip that allowed him to see the vast open spaces of the United States as well as Chicago. During that summer, Kovařík was occupied with copying out the manuscript of the New World Symphony from the autograph. I will now turn this talk over to Barbara Hawes, archivist and historian of the New York Philharmonic. She will pick up with the story of Dvořák after his return from Spillville. But first, I want to show you a special token that I bring today of the special relationship that developed between Dvořák and the New York Philharmonic. This is the honorary membership certificate that the Philharmonic Society awarded Dvořák in 1894, which I was able to photograph this past summer when I visited the Dvořák Country House at Vysoká in the Czech Republic, and it was never before documented, so we're very happy to share this now for you to see. So, Barbara.